Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John, and just over 2 years ago, I lost my mind and bought this excavator for $7,700. That seems like a really good deal, but it has been a long road to get here, and this is the whole story, including how much everything cost me.
And if you don't believe that's what I paid for it, maybe this will help. This is what it looked like when I got it.
This is a Case 170B excavator. It was made between 1985 and 1987. It's just over 11 feet wide and it weighs 70,000 pounds. It was actually made by Poquelin in France, but Case bought out the Poquelin equipment division, so it was rebranded as a Case machine and sold under the Case name. $7,700 for a machine of this size is basically scrap price, and I thought that was a great deal at the time since everything worked. When I looked at it, there were some obvious leaks on 2 hydraulic cylinders.
Leaks like crazy.
Some leaks under the engine, which didn't seem too bad, and a loud noise when swinging, which was a little concerning, plus some other smaller problems that we'll go through. But the engine started easily and all the functions worked. I figured, how bad can it be? Well, I was about to find out. First step, let's figure out how we're going to get these hydraulic cylinders dealt with.
The hydraulic cylinders had to come first because they're dripping so much oil, it basically makes the machine unusable. So I'm starting with the bucket cylinder, and first step is to get these hydraulic hoses disconnected. As we go through each repair, I'll give you the cost I paid for the parts along the way, and at the end of the video I'll give you the final tally, plus my best estimate of how many hours I spent doing all the work. And then we'll answer the big question, was this all worth it? Here I'm unscrewing the gland nut.
So the barrel is ratchet strapped to the tractor so it can't fall over.
I'm getting ready to pull the piston and rod out of the barrel. Things started out going okay, catching all the oil, but it doesn't all go okay. I got it in the end though, and the inside of the barrel looks good. So here's the piston, and I'm taking off the wear bands. And then it has 2 piston seals. These are what actually seal the oil. And they each have 2 parts. I just cut the second one off, made it a little easier. Now I've got to get the piston off to get the gland off, and I was having some trouble. So I ended up making a piston turning wrench. Got it. So now I can take the piston off, which allows me to take the gland off and get to the seals that were actually leaking.
I have never seen a seal that looks that bad.
That's the main rod seal. There's other seals in the gland that we're going to remove. And the wiper. All of this is going to get replaced. So I'm ready to go to the hydraulic shop to get new seals, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do the second cylinder as well.
It actually worked!
Which went fine, except for making one of the biggest messes I've ever made. Its barrel also looked okay, and my piston turning tool certainly helped, and the seal on the gland looked equally as horrible. So I got new seals at my local hydraulic shop. And here I'm installing with a seal installation tool.
Man, that looks a little better than the other one did, doesn't it?
So I reinstalled the wear bands. And all the other seals that go on the gland. Both glands, actually. Then got to work on putting the cylinder back together. Here's the gland going on the rod. And the piston. And of course my piston tightening tool came in handy again. And now we're putting on the piston seals. Now it's time to put this piston and rod back in the barrel. One down, one to go. And now it's just a matter of maneuvering these two cylinders back into position. A little easier said than done.
Ha!
Take that.
Well, that's one cylinder down.
I just have to hook the hydraulic lines back up and those two cylinders are done. So next I have to deal with this leaking hydraulic line. It leaks a lot of oil. Every time I start the machine, it just sits there and drips for days afterwards. And these fittings are not typical fittings. This is called a Proclane 2-bolt flange fitting, and they are not available anymore. So I can't just go buy a new line and throw it on there. So I'm going to have to try to fix this line. And you can see someone has done some brazing on it of some kind. Clearly this is not the original line. It's been modified to try to deal with these obsolete fittings.
Release the shmoo!
Doesn't that look nice? So I decided I was just going to remove the brazing and weld it. So first step, get the brazing off of here. Just heating it with an oxyacetylene torch and brushing the brazing off while it's liquid. Now I'm capping off the other end so I can do a pressure test on it.
Oh yeah, look at that. All right, if that leaks, well, that's going to be embarrassing.
Looks good. And while I'm here, I'll cover up the belting on this wonderful looking line. Hey, it's not leaking yet.
All right, we're ready to start putting oil back in this thing.
Here's the hydraulic oil tank. Actually, we're going to change out the hydraulic filters first.
Wow. Now in any of my other machines I'd be done. This one I've got to do it twice more.
Alright, we need to fill this thing with hydraulic oil. With all the leaks when I got it, it was basically empty. I end up adding 60 gallons. So hydraulic oil and filters cost $947. So I was ready to get some work done with this excavator. I was going to use it to fix this broken refrigerator. No, it doesn't have any refrigerant in it.
She's fixed now.
That was fun, but I'm still having a lot of noise when it swings. Also notice that the engine is underpowered. It seems to strain too much when I do basic functions. So we've made a little progress, but we have a long way to go. I can't stand working on this thing with it so dirty, so at this point I decided to give it a good cleaning. Here you can see the engine oil leaks. It looks like the oil pan might be leaking, as well as the oil cooler up here. So after many hours of power washing, a job that everybody loves, I went on to replacing the fan belts. This is an air-cooled diesel, and it does not have a radiator or coolant. It relies on a fan to cool everything, and it's very important that these belts are in good shape.
Yeah. We have an alternator belt.
So I got new belts and installed them, then started it up only to discover yet another problem. Yeah, the alternator's not working. We'll have to dig into that one later. So now I'm moving on to this broken hydraulic tank breather. It's important that this thing is in good condition because otherwise contaminants can get down into your tank. The original part was not available, so I am replacing it with a modern version and modifying it to fit. And now moving on to the air cleaner. The cover that's supposed to go here was missing, so I'm going to fabricate one.
Well, that thing doesn't look half bad. Doesn't look half good either, but that's not going anywhere.
And now this broken piece of fiberglass hanging off of the back. Not something that I wanted to put a lot of time into, so I do a admitted hack job repair on this. I tape it up with Gorilla Tape and paint over it.
Man, that looks great. That's the best looking area of the machine.
I actually never showed it in a video, but later I epoxy in a reinforcing plate to straighten out those fins. This is what it looks like today. It's been holding up for 15 months so far. So now it's time for the elephant in the room. I wanted to figure out this swing bearing noise. I was worried it was going to need a new swing bearing. I greased the heck out of it, and it made no difference whatsoever.
Swing brake switch.
This led to some fun electrical troubleshooting.
This is the control valve for the swing brake. This blue hose is supposed to be pressurized with hydraulic fluid over to the swing motors to release the brake.
And I discovered a bad connection under here. It had been arcing. These are DIN electrical connectors, and I got several of them for 12 bucks. Notice any difference? Yep, the noise was gone. All it was a bad electrical connection.
I think the next most pressing thing is this oil cooler. I'd really like to get the engine so that I can change the oil and it's not leaking.
So I've got to get the engine oil filter out of the way. And now we're going to take the cooler off. Now this oil cooler is not something that's on a typical engine. Remember, this engine has no radiator, so the way it cools the engine is by blowing air over various things, and this is a heat exchanger for the engine oil. It also blows air over cooling fins that are on each cylinder.
There you can see each individual cylinder. Inside this is a sleeve and then a piston. And then there's a separate one for each of the 6. And then a separate head. That's a separate head there.
So I got the oil cooler on the bench and pressure tested it to try to find the leak, hoping it'd be somewhere I could fix. But it was coming from way down deep inside. Unfortunately, a good replacement was not cheap. Now I need to deal with this fuel injection pump. I want to take this off and send it to Area Diesel Service and have them check it out, make sure it's working as it should, and if it's not, rebuild it.
That's weird. That did not seem like diesel fuel at all. That seemed like water.
It was water, and that's not supposed to be in there. Remember this for later. Taking a mechanical injection pump off of a diesel engine is not that easy because it has to be timed to the engine. So there's a lot of steps, a lot of things that have to happen. I did finally get it off though. Gonna pack this up and send it off to Area Diesel. Gonna send them the injectors too, so we gotta take those out. Well, that's looking a little rough. I'd say they're all looking a little rough. Bad injectors lead to poor fuel burn, smoking, low power. I think they need a rebuild. A couple weeks later, got a delivery from Area Diesel, and I've got everything ready to go. Injection pump rebuilt. They found several problems with it, fixed them all, gave it a nice paint job. That thing looks great. Injectors are all basically new. It's the same body, but it's a new nozzle and new retaining nut, a new oil cooler, and a gasket kit. Now, getting this thing installed correctly was very difficult. There were many separate challenges that I had to deal with. I'm not going to go through all that in this video. Let's just say many hours went by and I got the pump reinstalled. With a new fuel filter, I should add. This banjo right here is the one that water came out of. It goes to this line right here, which if you look at the top of it, has a hole in it. And I probably sprayed a bunch of water in that when I was power washing. And that goes to the intake. That is measuring the boost pressure and giving the pump information on how much fuel to inject. So my initial plan was just to buy a new line, or if I couldn't find it, make a new line. But it turns out this thing has metric fittings on both ends that had me and the part suppliers locally scratching our heads, so I decided to just weld it up.
And by the way, I did confirm that I didn't weld the pipe closed. There's plenty of airflow through it.
Having the injection pump and the injectors professionally rebuilt and calibrated costs $2,837, which hurts, but it's totally worth it. I'm going to put the oil cooler back in, but just like the pump, it was a lot easier said than done. If you want to see all the challenge involved in those things, check out the Large Marge playlist. And speaking of Large Marge, it was Area Diesel Service that came up with the name. This line broke when I took it off, so I got a new one at no small amount of effort and replaced it. New engine oil filter while we're here. This filter, the fuel filter, and the hose came to $244. So we're making progress, but we still can't run it. Next I need to adjust the valves. The quick summary is they were all a bit loose, like they hadn't been adjusted in a while, but nothing too bad. And now before I put the injectors back in, we want to check the compression. I'm using an injector blank to hook to my compression tester. And I'm getting just over 300 psi. Just over 300 psi is not great, but it is enough to run, and I was a little worried about that at first, but all the cylinders came to within 10 psi of each other, and then I realized the way I'm testing with an injector blank creates dead space, which is going to give you a falsely low reading. It's probably more like 330 or 340, which is really good. So now we can finally put these injectors back in, hook the fuel lines back to the fuel pump and to the injectors, bleed the lines, and we're ready to start it. Starts right up and idles great, but we're only just getting started working on this engine. I wanted to see if it was still going to be down on power and smoking a lot under load. It was a little better, but it definitely still had some issues. We get black smoke when I'm under load, which means it's injecting the fuel, but it's not getting the air. That makes you think turbo. It could be the turbo itself. It could also be our exhaust manifold leaking so much that it doesn't have enough pressure to feed the turbo. What we're gonna do now is the old farmer test on the turbo. I'm gonna take this intake pipe off so we can get to the turbo axle shaft and see how much play we can appreciate. I can move that quite a lot, and that's definitely not how it's supposed to be. Now, it isn't rubbing on anything when it spins. The other thing you want to check is the in and out play, pushing the shaft in, pulling it out, and you're not supposed to be able to feel any, and I must say I don't feel any that way. I mean, it's not that bad, I guess. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that turbo is going to need to be rebuilt at the very least, replaced at the worst. This is the charge air output to the intake. So now we need to go around to the fun side. And you can see that pipe there is totally rotted out. And that comes to our quote-unquote muffler. Of course, that was the only thing supporting it, so now it's here we have it. Here I'm trying to remove the 4 bolts that hold the turbo on.
Broke it off. Guess that's what I expected. It broke.
The last bolt was really inaccessible, but since I'm taking the manifold off anyway, I just decided to do that.
Okay. Well, that's a good start. How about that? Yeah, that one broke. That one came off. She came out. One fight at a time. Ooh. Did it move? It did something. I hope that stud just broke. Otherwise, it just ripped it right out of the block. I guess that thing was helicoiled. I figured this would happen. As I was taking this thing apart, I was thinking, man, it would be so much easier if I could cut this thing. But I wasn't sure if it would be salvageable. You know, if it all looked like that I could work with. You could machine that down a little bit if you had to and have a nice flat surface. This one is getting a little thin. This one is gone. It's not even flat anymore. And there's barely anything there. And that's on, you know, this upper piece. So that's junk. So go to the lower piece. That one looks okay. This one too. It's a little thin there, not too bad. This one is gone and paper thin. So yeah, both pieces of the exhaust manifold are junk. All right, now I have this one last stud to get, or bolt, or whatever that used to be. I guess it was a bolt. It's about to be an 11mm bolt. We're done asking. Wow. All right, we're going up to 11. And that is the driven portion of the turbo. That's a lot of play. Wow, it seems like there's even more over here. Yeah, in fact, I can push it and make it hit the wall. That's no good. I am going to pack this up and send it off to Area Diesel. I'm going to have to wait, but through the magic of YouTube, they ended up sending me a new turbo. And then I've got some exhaust stuff, a new muffler, brand new exhaust manifold. Now in order to install that manifold, I have to prep the block to receive it. And that means getting all these old studs out of here. This turns out to be quite a battle, and I have a video on it if you want to see the whole struggle. I'm just going to summarize it here, but I had to use just about every trick I know. I heated the studs with oxyacetylene, I used vice grips, I welded on nuts, I used penetrating oil, I used the air hammer, I heated the block to 750 Fahrenheit. Wow. Got one. That was helicoiled. I used the mag drill. I used left-handed drill bits. I retapped holes. And I used helicoils. Lots of helicoils. So getting the exhaust manifold reinstalled turned out to be like doing a blacksmith's puzzle. This was a challenging job. But not that hard. Nope. I think that stud's pulling out.
And you guessed it, more helicoils.
Here's the tap.
This is one of the oil lines for lubricating the turbo.
Turbo is done. Now, this is going to be a custom exhaust setup from here. I need to come out of this. I need to go to a muffler and then a stack. I come out straight, like square to that flange. I immediately hit the exhaust manifold. I gotta immediately start turning this way. This is gonna take some trial and error, I think. Probably more error than trial. Boy, that looks surprisingly good, actually. You even have a little clearance there. Got a little clearance, Clarence.
I had to make a custom bracket to support the muffler.
Now we can actually hook up the filtered air to the turbo. New turbo look nice. And the new exhaust manifold. You can see it's actually got a seal against the block, unlike the last one. Fires right up.
So yeah, that made a huge difference in how this thing runs. Engine's putting out good power, there's no hesitation, it's not smoking. I think it's running the way it's supposed to. So the new turbo, the exhaust manifold, and the new muffler, all told, cost $3,826. That's not cheap, but what a difference it made. So on to the next task, another challenge. This flex hydraulic line, which comes from the bottom of the tank to the main hydraulic pump, is leaking and is not available. So I had to figure out how I was going to replace this thing. In spite of doing an extensive search, I was not able to find it in the US, and I ended up ordering this pipe from one of my patrons who lives in Poland. Now all I need is an adapter to go between these two pipes. And after lots of turning and drilling and boring, I end up with these two pieces that I need to cut at the right angle. Cost of the hose and the clamps for this repair was $351.
That's not going anywhere.
Next on the list is the hydraulic oil cooler, which sits right here in the machine.
Ugh, that's disgusting. So this is the top of that oil cooler. I power washed down through this, degreased it multiple times, washed it multiple times. I've tried tightening all the connections. That doesn't do anything. The oil is coming from up in there somewhere. It's either the seal on the top of this fan motor, or it's the cooler itself. Oh, there it goes. Just had to quit being a wimp. Oh, boy. It's made of aluminum, but it's not light. It's a good looking mess right there. It leaks. See it leaking there. Yeah, got quite a bit of air pressure in there. You can see it leaking. Here's our seal.
This is an expensive seal. With shipping, I ended up paying like 40 bucks, but this seal can take some PSI. I think it's up to 50 or something.
It's nice to have that thing reasonably clean. Look at that leaky old oil cooler. Hey, check that out. I did it. I got it re-cored. This is what I decided was the best way to go. I looked for a long time on trying to just get a more modern oil cooler off the shelf, because I mean, I ended up paying $2 for this. It's a lot of money. But I could not find one of the same dimensions. I could find the length and width, but it was half as thick, and that means you have far less heat transfer in that amount of space. Click! The oil cooler is on.
Next, we're going to fix these broken windows. What's in here is tempered glass, and what I'm going to replace it with is polycarbonate, or Lexan. I had to do some work on the door mechanism. Let's see if I can get the seal out of here. I got that working, so now we can put in the new glass, which isn't glass. The new plastic glass. How about a new seat cover while we're at it? New glass and seat cover, $527. Now let's get to work on this oil pan leak.
So there's a crack in the gasket right there, and a bigger one right there. Looks like another one there.
New gasket.
Okay. I think that's fixed. No leaky.
The bucket was missing a tooth, so I got a new one for the low price of $69.
There we go.
I also welded all the pins in place so I didn't have to worry about any teeth falling off. I also added a solar panel and a charge controller for $147. Now even if the machine sits for an extended period of time, the battery will always be full. New problem popped up. I've got a leak in the area of my final drive. So let's see what's going on with that.
Or at least, here, broke number 2. Well, there it is. Come on. Broke it.
Well, there you can see where it was leaking. The rest of these pipes looked okay, but I wanted to do what I could to prevent them from rusting any further in the future. I also had some work to do on the cover plates. And I decided to replace the hard line with a soft line, which will fit in there. Looks good, doesn't it? Just about done? Nope. Got to do the whole other side. This one took a lot more time than money. It was $200 for the hoses, paint and rust converter, and about 40 hours of labor. So next I started working on the electrical, and after several hours of looking at wiring diagrams and circuit boards and fuses, I was able to get the low oil pressure light working, the hour meter working, and the temperature gauge working.
I think it's actually working.
Next I wanted to fix the high-speed drive. The machine is supposed to have a low and a high travel speed, and it only goes in low. Many of the functions, including this, are controlled by these electrically actuated hydraulic valves, so I'm putting DIN connectors with an LED indicator on them to help me troubleshoot. So this allows me to easily tell which solenoids are getting power, and I learned that the high-speed solenoid is not receiving any voltage.
High speed is not on. High speed, low speed, high speed, not doing anything.
And after many hours of poking around on circuit boards and tracing wires, poring over wiring diagrams, several different wiring diagrams that conflicted with each other, I discovered that a relay was missing from the board.
Oh yeah, that's faster, much faster. So this is normal tracking here, and this is high. Look at that. Like twice as fast. So this is normal, high.
Yep, it goes from ridiculously slow to annoyingly slow. Now I just need to tension the tracks. A simple little thing that, had it worked, would have saved me so much effort.
21.5.
The tracks are tensioned by putting grease in a grease cylinder, but of course the seals were blown out.
Those are failed seals. So rebuilding the track adjusters means you have to take the tracks off. And these are the old style tracks where you have to drive out a master pin, which is that one. Maybe it won't be too bad. It ain't moving.
Doesn't look like it's moving.
We were able to get it to move a tiny bit, but then no matter how hard we hit, it just would not move any further.
Happy Gilmore, run up and take a swing.
Didn't budge.
So I added support behind the track to maximize the amount of force we were getting. That's a 20-pound sledgehammer, by the way.
Did it move?
Not a bit.
Damn.
Not even 1,000.
That's absurd.
So it's time for a different plan.
All right, that is a 50-ton bottle jack.
I'm welding up a frame to allow me to use this bottle jack to push it out. We had a few false starts, and it was a little scary, putting a lot of force on that thing. But finally we got it moving.
I think it's coming out.
It's moving. There's no doubt about it.
Here's the idler wheel, which has the grease cylinder on the other side of the yoke.
So my parts breakdown shows 2 seals here, and man, they are gone. Well, that definitely could be better in there. There's a fair amount of corrosion.
So I got out the cylinder hone and got to work.
So there's the finished product. It feels perfectly smooth, and I don't think that's going to have any trouble sealing grease.
Something looks odd about this track tension spring.
Broken is what it is.
Yeah, the pre-tensioning rod in the track springs was broken, which turned a big job into a colossal job. So let's rip the other side apart and see what's going on there. I made myself a pin press based on threaded rod and that bottle jack so that I could get this pin out of here easier this time.
Let's get ready to push. Sounds like I'm an obstetrician or something. Something's moving. A little easier. Wow.
We fought with that pin for 3 days last time. This took a few hours. Yep, this side's broken too. So into the shop I go to make some pre-tensioning bolts. I'm starting with making 2 nuts out of this hex stock. I'm going to thread these on and then weld them in place for the bolt heads. So I think that's it. This is a piece of 2-inch 4140 that's going to be the bolt shaft. The steel I needed to make these tensioning bolts was right at $200. So I'm going to drill out the old bolt that broke off and then re-thread it.
So now I need to make 7 inches of thread on this other end that actually will be screwed into there.
So here's the setup. This end threads into this plate. The other end threads onto that nut, which will act as the bolt head, and I can weld that in place. And now I can reassemble this thing using my new tensioning bolt. Now all I have to do is tighten down the bolt to compress the spring to where it should be. This didn't work as well as I would have liked, but it did work well enough. And if you think this was bad, the other side was a real doozy. It went way worse, full of dramas, and I'm not going to go into all that. Watch the Large Marge playlist if you want to see it. Let's just say, in the end, I did get both track spring assemblies fixed. So we can finally work on putting these tracks back together. First step, put the spring assembly back in the frame. Now I need to install the new seals on the track adjuster cylinders. These were not easy to get. I had to get them custom made, and they cost $211. And here I'm installing the wiper onto the barrel.
Got it. There it is.
So there's that side done. Now we have to do the other side. I'm cutting out a lot of the repetition in this video, so you're only seeing little bits and pieces.
There it is.
I pumped grease in them to get the air out, then reinstall them in the frame. And now we're ready to put the tracks back together. Finally.
Well,
We can now put the pin in, maybe. And now I can finally do what I started out trying to do, tension the tracks. And would you look at that? They work. Yeah, so far I've had to replace 6 hydraulic lines. Now all of these are the smaller lines on the machine which use DIN fittings and don't use those obsolete Proclaim fittings. I haven't had to deal with those yet. Total cost of all my hydraulic lines and fittings so far is $399.
No leaky leaky.
So now I have more electrical troubleshooting to do before I can use this thing. I need to work on this. This is a button that is supposed to activate the horn if these belts ever break, because that would mean that the cooling fan is not spinning. So it's very important that this system works. If I don't have anything to notify me that those belts break or come off, then I can potentially destroy the engine because it's going to rapidly overheat. I studied the wiring diagram to figure out how it was supposed to work. Then I discovered that 2 relays had been pulled off the board that are necessary for this system to work, so I put them back. And that made the warning lamp come on in the cab for the first time, but it shouldn't be on because the button's not being pressed. So why is that?
My wire is broken between here and the cooling belt switch.
I discovered that the wire was broken inside this molded junction here, and it's not really something that's serviceable, so I had to run a new wire. I got the wire fixed, but the horn in the machine doesn't work, so I replaced it with a new one. We're most of the way there.
We have a horn. Alright.
The problem is the horn doesn't work on the control in the cab.
Button doesn't work.
More troubleshooting, running new wires, soldering. And the joystick handle that was there was broken. I decided maybe Marge would appreciate a little bling. And I think finally the horn job is done. So next I tore into this old alternator. I ended up having to do a complete teardown of it and a deep dive into how alternators work. I'm not going to repeat all that in this video. It's a pretty interesting one if you want to watch it. But I did eventually discover that it had a bad voltage regulator, and I put it all back together and it worked. But that was just a bench test. Let's see if it works on the machine.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the key on. If that charging lamp lights, which it never used to, that's going to tell me that the wiring between here and the alternator is good. And this should determine if it's going to work. So key on. Uh-oh.
After some more troubleshooting, I determined that this connector had been ripped off of the circuit board in the control panel. So let's solder it back on.
Alright guys, moment of truth. I got a camera back here. That's voltage at the battery.
So now when I turn the key on, the charging light comes on like it should. Now it should go off when the engine starts.
Yes! Yes!
And the voltage is climbing, the alternator is working, the system is charging. Next on the list, I need to fix this thumb. The thumb that's on there just does not work at all. A friend gave me this thumb, which is better, but it's still a little too short for this machine, so it's going to need some modification. So let's get this old thumb off of there. And here I'm gouging off the mounting brackets. And after some significant modifications, I'm welding them back on. I had to make some custom bushings so that the new thumb would fit. Most of the steel I used on this thumb job was stuff I had laying around, but I did have to buy some for $95.
That's not going anywhere.
So let's test out the new thumb. This is a stump from a tree I cut down a couple years ago. It's extremely heavy. I think it probably weighs around 10,000 pounds.
That's awesome. What a machine.
Next on the list, changing the final drive oil.
All right. Hey, look at that. Yep.
One side down, one side to go. This oil was actually pretty expensive and cost $109. I installed a much needed fan. A good quality one with a support arm was $125. Next on the list, I need to do something about this missing side panel.
That side panel was never there from the beginning, and this is where the batteries sit, and it's looking pretty rough. Pretty rough.
Okay, side door and battery compartment are done. Cost for steel, hinges, paint, and battery trays came to $416. At this point, I thought I had fixed everything on the machine that needed fixing, so I was getting ready to do some painting, and then I noticed this crack in the boom, all the way through, both sides. Apparently we have more work to do. So I got to work on it. First step, get this hydraulic cylinder out of the way. I used fault finders so I knew exactly where the cracks were. I got out the air arc gouger and got to work. Lots of gouging. And I ended up gouging this side all the way off because reasons. Yeah, I made some mistakes in this job and it took some doing to get things right. So then I got to welding, which takes a while. Lots of passes. Here, let me speed it up a little bit. The problem is when you weld metal, it will bend it, and that was making it so the pin wouldn't go through. So it took some more doing to get the pin close, and then finally to get it to go all the way through. But we did get there in the end. So now we can get back to this paint job, which consists of step 1, cleaning, step 2, rust converting, step 3, priming, and step 4, painting, most of it with 2 coats. Alright, the paint job is done. Total cost for paint, primer, rust converter, and some other things came to right around $500. And to make the machine really look complete, it has to have some decals.
I have to say, I did not realize what a huge difference these decals would make. That thing looks amazing.
So there you go, guys. Marge is done. That was easy. So what's the final tally? The total amount that it would cost to buy the machine, all the parts, everything that I've listed here is $25,600. Now, full disclosure, I'm a YouTuber and I was able to get some of those things for free or for cheaper because of that. So the total that I have in it right now is $21,000. And that seems like a pretty good deal until you tally all of the hours that I have in this thing. Now, I've done my best to make a very rough estimate of my time, and it's difficult to do because it's hard to know how much extra time is added by all the filming and everything. That definitely slows things down. And then what all do you count? Like when I'm on the internet looking for parts or on the phone trying to find parts, does that count? I would say yes. What about when I'm brainstorming solutions on how to solve a problem? I mean, I'm doing that almost all the time. Does that count? It's just hard to get an exact tally. Plus, I don't keep track of my time as I'm doing it. Anyway, my best, very rough estimate for the total hours that I have in this machine over the last 2 years is 840 hours. Now, a lot of this stuff I'm doing for the first time, so a shop would go much faster than me. So what's it worth now? Well, that's also hard to say. It looks great, in lots of ways it is great, but it's still a 40-year-old excavator and things are gonna break. The biggest weakness it has now is a lot of old hydraulic lines that are just gonna leak and have to be replaced over time. Now I could go through and replace all of them. That would be a big expense, a tremendous job. I don't really plan to do that at this point, although it is kind of in the back of my mind. If I got my own hydraulic crimper, you know, maybe that would be kind of a cool thing to do. So what is the machine worth as it sits? Well, that all depends on the buyer. The problem with machines like this is they're very expensive to move. It's just never economical to move it from job site to job site. So that limits the market severely on who wants it. It would have to go to a place where it's just going to go there and stay, like a farm or a mining site or something like that. And most mining sites aren't going to tolerate the problems you're going to get from a 40-year-old machine. So there's not many people that are going to buy this thing. All that said, I do think it's probably worth somewhere in the range of 30 to 40,000. The fact that I've documented and videoed all the repairs is a big plus, because usually when you're buying something like this, it's a huge gamble. You could have something that's about to break and you don't really know what you're buying. Here you could watch the videos and you really know exactly what you're getting. I've kind of been through the whole darn thing. So is this all worth it? Well, let's do some math. If I have 21,000 in this, which I do, and I've put 840 hours into it, if it ends up being worth $30,000, that means all my labor generated 9 grand. And you do the math, that comes out to $10.70 an hour. That's not even minimum wage. That's pretty bad. Now, if I could sell it for 40, then it would end up coming around to like $22 an hour, which is not horrible, but also not good for a heavy equipment mechanic. A repair shop on the cheap side is going to charge $100 an hour for their labor, probably more like $150. Obviously, a repair shop would have gone much faster than I did. Let's say twice as fast. Let's say they did all this work in 420 hours. I don't know if that's reasonable or not. I'm doing the best I can. At $100 an hour, that's $42,000 in labor, plus the $25,000 that, you know, it would be for the parts and the machine. At $150, that comes to $63,000 in labor. Plus the machine and the parts, that would put you $88,000 into this machine. If it then ends up being only worth $30,000, well, you've just lost yourself 58 grand. And that's why these machines get scrapped. You're just going to lose money. So knowing all that, was this worth it? I think for most people, that's a hard no. It is not worth it. You're much better off buying a newer machine with fewer problems, where everything is pretty much ready to go for 20 to 30,000, and you can do that. But again, for me being a YouTuber, the answer is a little different. I'm in the rare position of when something breaks, I can actually make money by fixing it as long as I video the process. Now, I'm not planning on selling this thing anytime soon, but when that time comes, even if I only get 30,000 for it, which I do think I could get 30 for it, and that comes to that 1070 an hour, I'll still do way better than that because of the videos. So because I'm a YouTuber, for me, this did make sense. And I have to thank all of you for that, especially my patrons. Without all of your guys' support and you guys watching me, this never would have happened. And old Margie here would have long since been cut up in a scrap yard and probably already melted down. So seriously, thank you guys. We saved that from the scrap yard together. Now don't worry, I've got plenty more content in the works, stuff on the way that I've already started working on. For now, Marge is fixed until the next thing breaks. And thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.